In this video, I'm going to demonstrate how we can use Visual Studio to complete assignments for this course. And I really have three goals. In the video, I'm going to show you how to create two C# programs, very simple programs. I'm going to show you how to use comments in your code. And then I'm going to show you how to zip up your files and get them ready to be submitted. So in this class, we're going to use software called Visual Studio to create all of our work. And I have it open now. Your version may or may not look exactly like this. They change over time a little bit. If you have a newer version than me at the time I've recorded this, it may look a little different. But this is the basic idea. And if you don't look exactly like this, I should be able to help you through getting set up. When we want to get started on our work, we need to create a new project. And this is going to introduce an idea that's important here at the beginning, that in Visual Studio, we have two different, I would call them containers for now, two different containers for the work that we create. We have solutions and projects. And for now, a project is a program, and a solution is a group of related programs. And to give you an example, most of the assignments in this class are going to have kind of two parts, a part A and a part B. And so each of those are separate from each other. They each run independently to solve whatever problem you're assigned. And so those are projects. But they kind of belong together because they're both part of this one assignment. They're both part of one module that you're working on. So they're going to go together in the same solution. And this is important because it has a big impact on how you submit your files. And if you don't submit them correctly, I can't grade them and give you full credit. So it's really important to understand how this works. To get started, we're going to need to create a new project. You can see I have a quick action button for that. If for some reason you don't have that, you can also go File, New Project, and you'll get the same thing. So I'm going to click New Project, and I have all kinds of options here. Many of them are way beyond what we're going to do in this course, and maybe way beyond your ability to understand at this point. You can see Visual Studio is a really flexible tool, and there's all kinds of different interesting stuff you can create. In this course, all we care about are what we call console applications, and then later on what we call Windows Forms applications. And to find them, there's a search bar at the top. And so if I just type console, console is the most basic one. If you're a Mac user, by the way, you don't have access to Windows Forms. You'll have to see information in Canvas about that. But we have console app as one of our options. And notice that this says C# next to it. In Visual Studio, you can also make console applications using different languages. So be careful. Don't turn in something for me that is not in C#. And it's important for me personally that you pick the right one that is compatible with Linux, Mac, and Windows, because I'm grading your work probably on a Mac, and you probably are using Windows. So if you pick, for example, this one down here that uses something called .NET Framework, I'm not going to be able to grade it. So we want a console app. And I'm going to hit Next. And here's where we run into this idea of projects and solutions. And so for a project name, I usually give you that in the program prompt, or if I'm giving you one of the problems out of the textbook, it will tell you to what to call it. And the exact problems I assign change over time, and so it won't be the same in this video. I'm just going to say that this is going to be a program that is about my family, where I give the names of my family, so it's going to be called Family. And you'll see that here I have a project name, and here I have a solution name, and by default, they are the same. But I'm going to want to have more than just my family program in here, so I'm going to change this. I like to call this, I like to name this whatever the assignment is. So this is Module 1 Labs. And what's important and useful here is that it's going to make a folder on your computer for that. And so if you don't like where it saves it, by the way, For convenience, I'm going to move mine to the downloads folder. For the purpose of this video, that's not necessarily the best place to keep it, but now you can see it's going to be saved in the downloads folder. It's going to make a folder called Module 1 Labs, and then the project is going to be called Family. So I will go ahead and hit Next. And on this screen, it's where we pick something called a framework, and that's kind of beyond what we're talking about now, but you can see there are some different options here. Depending on how new your installation is, it might not say this, but if you're getting something older than .NET 7, you should probably email me. We might need to get you to update something if maybe you're using an old version, because it might not be compatible with what I'm using to grade. So at that point, I'm going to go ahead and hit Create. You shouldn't have to change that, by the way. It should default to the most recent one, but you never know. All right, so once it grinds away at that and creates our project, this is what we have. And so this main panel in the middle is where we're going to do most of our work. This is where our code is. I'm going to zoom in on that for the purpose of the video. And over on the right, we have a Solution Explorer. I was just talking about solutions, and this is like, it's not exactly a view of what's on your hard drive, like your saved files, but it's sort of like that. And you can see within this solution, I have a project called Family. Ultimately, I have a file called program.cs. The .cs is C#, and that is this source code that we're looking at. You can see the tab says program.cs. If you ever accidentally close that, you can just open it again in your Solution Explorer. And what you may notice is probably what you see here looks very different from what you see in your textbook. The textbook is a little bit out of date, or it's a little older, I should say. The content is not out of date, and I kind of like that the older book is a little cheaper, typically for students to get. So we're okay with that, but it just looks a little different, and that's going to be a problem as we go through the course, some of the things we want to work on. So for now, notice that I've got this little screwdriver icon. That means it has a potential problem. It's kind of giving you a recommendation. So if I click that, and my option is convert to program.main style program, and it's giving me a preview of what that looks like. And you'll notice that looks a lot more like what we see in the textbook if you've been looking into the textbook lately. So that's what I want to do. I'm going to go ahead and click on that, and it's going to make some changes. Now, it's probably gotten more confusing because you may not know what all that stuff means, but that's what we'll learn as the class goes on, as the course goes on. I'm using that word carefully because you see the word class up there. So this is my source code. There's a tradition in computer programming and in computer science of a first program that a person writes is the computer saying hello to the world. It's just a hello world program. So Microsoft has made Visual Studio use that as kind of its default. And if I want to test this program, if I want to run it, I have a toolbar at the top, and there is a green play button here. I'm going to go ahead and click that, and we'll see what's happening. It is compiling my program and converting it into something it can run, and that takes a moment, especially the first time. And then it's going to pop up a window with my output. This is a console. And remember, we created a console app. That means it is a program that runs in this kind of a window. It's super boring looking, unless you're nerdy like me. But up here at the top, it says Hello World. That's what we saw there in our code. And then it has some information about the program. And then it just pauses here until I'm done looking. And I can press any key and it will close. Now, if I change the text in here and say, hello students, and run it again, it will now say hello students. You'll also notice it compiled a lot more quickly that time because a lot of the work was already done. With such a small change, it didn't have to do much. So that's the basic idea to get us set up on creating our first program. Now, the next thing we need to know how to do here is to work with something called a comment. And the textbook can give you lots of information about that, but what's important to us here is that I require you to have a comment block at the top of all of your source code that it's like putting your name at the top of a paper in your English class or your math class, something So what I can do is if I type a slash and then an asterisk, you can see that the color of everything turns green, and that's because a slash and an asterisk is the start of a comment block. And comments are ignored by the computer. The comments are only there for the humans to read. And so that green shading to the text is to signify that this is a comment and that it's going to be ignored. I'm actually going to put 2 slashes there, and as I hit enter, it's going to keep putting asterisks, and when I put another slash, it sort of closes that off. And you see that the shading, the color coding goes back to how it was before. So I can put whatever I want in here, and Visual Studio, the compiler I should say, is going to ignore that. It's not really considered part of the source code. It's not part of the program. But your teacher, for example, can look at that and see some information. In my assignments, I require you to have a heading, as I mentioned, and in the interest of time, I'm going to do kind of what you are likely to do. I'm going to copy and paste. So I'll delete that, and I'll copy and paste over it. This is just a generic one, but you're going to want to put your name. You're going to put whatever assignment you're working on, if it's Part A or Part B. And then I don't need a novel, but I need just a little blurb about what this program does. Your lab is different than what's on your screen, what I'm recording right now. Probably, I've probably changed it. So at this point, you should go over and look at what the directions are for the lab, and you should type a little blurb that explains what this Part A program is going to do. Once you've done that, we're ready to now start on our program. We don't really need to make it say hello students or hello world or anything like that. So I'm going to delete that. And my example here is that I'm going to output the names of the people in my family. So I'm going to say console.writeLine, and in parentheses and quotation marks, so I'm in my family, .writeLine, my wife is named Alyssa. And as I'm typing, it's color coding. And you'll also notice as I'm typing, it's trying to predict, almost like autocorrect, it's trying to predict what I'm doing. If I like its prediction, I can just hit the tab key and it will accept that. Once I put type, it'll say, and it knows that I'm probably likely to do a right or a right line. And so I'll do right line. Oldest daughter is named Audrey. And let's stop here for a moment. I don't like to write too many lines of code before I run the program. First of all, running the program in Visual Studio is going to save my work, but it's also smart because if I have an error, I want to fix that right away. If I write 10 lines of code and then run it and there's an error, I got to figure out on 10 lines of code where my mistake is. If I write 1 line of code and try it and get an error, I only have to fix 1 line. So for beginning programmers, just run your code very often. So there are my 3 names. So far, so good. Looks like it's working. It's a good chance to demonstrate the difference between right and right line. Let me actually just delete that and show you the difference between right and right line. The book covers this a little bit, but if on that second one, if I put right, I shouldn't just abandon my youngest daughter here. What if she sees this video? So I do have another daughter. Emma. Sorry, Emma. Let's see the difference between right line and right. So I'm going to go ahead and run this. And what you see, again, I'll zoom that in so you can see it a little better. It says Tim, and then on the next line it says Alyssa Audrey. And then it goes to the next line and says Emma. So right line outputs something, and then it's essentially like hitting enter at the end. And it puts the cursor, it's not really a cursor, but it moves down to the next line. If I don't put that, if I put right line, then it prints out whatever's in the quotation marks, and then it stops and waits. And the next time it outputs something, it picks up right where it left off. So that's important to understand about how that works. So, if I really want to get fancy, I can put an escape code in there, I guess, and get my new line that way. But At this point, you should stop and you should go write your code for whatever you need to do for lab part A, and then come back to this video and we'll move on to part B. Okay, so by now you should have finished part A of the lab and we're ready to move on to part B. Because of how I need to run through these to grade them when you submit, I really need you to put both of your programs, both parts of this assignment, into the same solution file. So we don't go on to the next step quite the same way we did before by creating a new solution. What instead we're going to do is create a new project, but make sure it stays inside this same solution. So we have a few ways we can do that. I could right-click on the solution over here in my Solution Explorer, and I could say, I know it's a little different on I'm a Mac user normally, so a little bit disoriented here. I could say Add New Project, that would do it. And I think I can also just say File, New Project. Either way should get me to the same screen. This is going to look familiar. As you start to use this, you'll see that you have some kind of frequently used ones, the console app. You might want to just pin that because you're going to use it pretty much every time. Like I said, eventually you'll need Windows Forms. But we're going to need a console app, and I'll hit next. And so far this is the same, but there's an important distinction here. This is going to be, in my case, this next project is going to be called Pets, but I don't want it in a new solution. So you see that there's a new line here, a new option, create a new solution. I don't want to create a new solution. I want to add it to my current solution. So that will dim out my solution name, and you'll see it's still Module 1 Labs. I'm going to go ahead and hit Next, and it will create that. Oh, sorry, I forgot. I got to confirm that I'm using the same version, the same framework. So I'll go ahead and hit Great. And now we're right back where we were. I'm once again going to convert this to a program.main style. I suppose somewhere there's a setting where I can change that and make it permanent. I will look that up and share that information. It's a small step, but it's an important one. Okay, and so now we're back. Again, we've got the same kind of template that we had before, and once again, I'm going to start out by pasting a comment block, and for this one, it's going to be the names of my pets. Okay, it's not very. These aren't very exciting labs here. So hopefully, are slightly more interesting. All right, and so instead of my pets right now, I've only got one pet in my family, but I have some other pets that are like my parents and stuff. So I'll just list a couple of those. And so now I'm ready to test this, and I go to run it, and it's still running my old program. So this is important. Once you have two different projects in your solution, you need to identify which one runs when you execute this program. So up here, it's got family highlighted, and it's sort of subtle to see, but in the Solution Explorer, you can see, or I can see at least, and you can probably see it on your own screen, family is kind of in bold compared to pets. And so what I can do is I can right click on pets, and there is an option here called Set as Startup Project. So the startup project is the one that runs when I click the play button. It's not, I keep calling it the play button. It's the run button. So now I've changed that to, you can see that it's now kind of highlighted, and up here on the run button, it is changed to say pets. So I'm going to click that, and it should execute my code for outputting the names of pets. And I can always switch back. I can right click and say set a startup project. It's a real easy way to just choose which one you need to run at any given time. And again, the key here is that both of these are within the same Module 1 Labs project. That's what we're after here. So once again, this is a good place to pause, and now you can go off and complete part B of your lab, and then return here, and we'll show you how to correctly get that file, all those files zipped up to submit. All right, the last thing we need to do, now that you have completed both of those labs that are part of this assignment, both of the parts, I should say, of this lab assignment, is we need to get this all packaged up and submitted in a way that your instructor can access and run without any problems. And that's a little trickier than it might sound. So it's not that I'm trying to be uptight about it. It's just that if you don't submit it correctly, it's not going to run on my end, and I can't go back and debug all of these for everyone. So if you have trouble the first week or so, that's understandable, and obviously I'm going to work through it and with you and help you get on track. But you need to be learning the way that I need these submitted. Otherwise, I'm just not going to bother. Again, not trying to be a jerk about it, but I just don't have time to sort out projects that aren't submitted correctly. So this part is important. I don't want you losing points over silly stuff. So what I need to do is I need to find the folder on my computer where this solution is stored, and with the solution, the projects that I have created within it. And so when you first created your project and your solution, I selected a folder, but you may not remember where that is. The default location may not be kind of intuitive. Spoiler alert, it actually shows it down here too in the properties panel. But there is also an easy way. You can just right click on the solution and you can say, again, I'm used to a Mac, so I should be able to find it. On a Mac, it says show in Finder, because Finder is the application we use. On Windows, it's open folder in File Explorer. And so if I do that, it's going to open to my inside of my solution file. Now I am inside the folder, and unfortunately I'm like one level too far. So this is saved in the downloads folder. I'm going to go back to downloads, and this is what I'm looking for. I'm looking for this Module 1 Labs, and I'm going to right click on that, and I am going to create a zip file out of this. So I have some options on here that you probably don't have, and I don't want you to use even if you did. I don't want a 7-zip. I want to go to send to, and I want to I want to send this to a compressed or zipped folder. And on Mac, I'm just blanking on the name, but it's similar. It's right click and create zip or something like that. It should be obvious. Email me if you're having trouble. So I'm going to create a compressed or a zipped folder. And this now is like a bundle of all of the files that relate to this project. So this is what you're going to submit on Canvas. I'm going to download this to my computer, and I'm going to decompress it, uncompress it, unzip it, we call it, and I'll have all of your files, and I'll be able to run them without any problems. So at this point, go ahead and zip up your solution file, and then head back into Canvas. Submit this file. As I mentioned a few minutes ago, if you do have problems, I'm not out to get you. If you have problems getting this submitted correctly, I will help you resolve that. But you're going to need to learn to do it correctly early on in the course so that we can get your points to you without any problems. If you have any questions, just reach out to me.